Now, let's get to our top stories. Conflict of interests? Oh, there's plenty of it. We're going to dig down deep into what might be motivating certain politicians in this country to cover for China. Meantime, nepotism is running rampant in the Biden administration. Hey, everybody's getting their little bit of America's taxpayer dollars into their pockets, right? And if you have somebody serving in the administration, that's your ticket in. And Texas trailblazing. That's our top story tonight. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is leading the resistance against Joe Biden's radical lawless agenda. In 1 week, Abbott signed bills banning critical race theory, allowing Texans to carry handguns without a permit. He's also meeting with state lawmakers in a special session to address voting integrity, and Texas is joining Arizona in securing the border. And don't forget the wall, the Texas wall. Joining me now to discuss is Texas Congressman Pat Fallon. Congressman, it's always great to see you. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is making major strides, and you've been unafraid of calling out Biden as well. Here's a tweet you put out there. Wokeness at home and weakness abroad. That's Joe Biden's legacy. Boy, ain't that the truth. Congressman, the news broke today that Nebraska will join Florida and Arizona by sending officers to help secure the U.S. border. What does it say about Biden's leadership that he inspires states to band together to fight his lawless policies?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me on. And we've never seen this before. This is the Biden border crisis, and Joe Biden has really made every state in this country a border state. We talked about this a few months ago when you shed light on the border issue, and it's not even a crisis anymore. It's a catastrophe. It is literally worse now today in June than it ever has been. Last month, there were, I believe, 185,000 illegals that crossed. The prior month in April, it was 178,000. And if you go back to 2020, when President Trump was in office, in May of 2020, it was like 23,000 crossed. So this is 7 and 8 times worse than it was under President Trump.
Governor Abbott is pushing for a stronger voting integrity bill, too, which he hopes he's going to do in special session. Meanwhile, Democrats are using Texas and other states' efforts to ensure one eligible voter to one vote to push their bills to federalize elections and ban voter ID. Will the GOP hold the line against these Democrats' efforts to legalize cheating at the ballot box?
Well, Chris, they have to. I mean, otherwise we're not going to have a country anymore. We have to have free, honest, open, and transparent elections. We should be aiming for the most transparent and open and honest and free elections in the world. What Georgia did and what Florida has done and what Texas is about to do is not making it harder for anybody to vote. It's making it a lot harder for anybody to cheat. And that's the differentiation there. And that's why the Democrats are tripling down on this. You know, I used to say, to people, if you want a $100 million lottery ticket, there's 2 ways to redeem it. You can mail it in or you can walk it in. And what are you going to do? Everybody would walk it in. So why is it any different with voting? I mean, if you're able to go out and vote, if you're physically capable of doing so, you should vote in person and not by mail.
No kidding. It is our most important right. After all, we ought to have a paper trail to actually log and see how we voted. And by the way, those efforts that I was just talking to you about by Democrats, they ban voter ID. Democrat socialists in this country, Congressman, want to ban voter ID, which is widely popular among a vast majority of Americans. I think the recent polling is 80% support voter ID.
Yeah, they're very selective with their outrage. They say that it's the soft bigotry of low expectations to say that folks our minority brothers and sisters can't get an ID to go and vote. That's ridiculous. And they say it's because it disproportionately affects people of color. Well, they don't have any problem, the Democrats that is, and making sure that the FAA requires photo IDs when you get on an airplane. So that's not systematically racist, but it's systemically racist to say you need an ID to vote. That's ridiculous. You don't need a utility bill. You need a photo ID to make sure that you are who you say you are when you cast a ballot. Every couple of times a year. This is a very reasonable ask. And the Democrats are just really showing their radical agenda and their, and their true beliefs.
The only people who have a problem with showing who you say you are those who were elected Democrats. You and 13 other House Republicans have signed a letter from former Obama and Trump physician and fellow Congressman Ronnie Jackson, who want Biden to get a cognitive test as soon as possible. Congressman, are you sure you want to do that? Miss Put My Face on a Cookie, Border Czar Harris, is waiting in the wings. Let's just say we do find out that Mr. Biden has lost some mental acuity. Goodness sakes, do you know what that means?
Chris, it might be the cure is worse than the disease, but The reason why I signed the letter is it's not so much that Joe Biden's the oldest president we've ever had at 78 years of age, and the fact that we've only had presidents for 232 years, and he's been alive for a third of that time. It's the repeated and really embarrassing gaffes. This is a pattern of behavior. And, as a member of Congress, I represent 760,000 Americans. But as president, Biden represents 330,000 Americans. I'm sorry, 330 million Americans. And in an indirect, in a very real way, a couple of billion people that live in Jeffersonian democracy. He's the leader of the free world. We want to make sure that he has got the mental capacity, because we want somebody at their apex of their game, not somebody that's in decline.
Congressman, the reporting by Red State and Adam Housley and others swirling around an alleged Chinese defector that the Defense Intelligence Agency has in their custody. What can you tell us? And if he is spilling information about the virus origins and as to which Americans are helping Communist China, shouldn't the American people know this information as soon as possible?
Well, Chris, I'll tell you this. I really hope that we do have a high-level Chinese defector, because he could shed a lot of light on what happened in Wuhan about a year and a half ago. And if it is true that leaked out of a laboratory, the Chinese communist regime in Beijing is responsible for millions of deaths and trillions of dollars in damage to the economy across the world. And there is also a theory that they knew after the leak had occurred, they knew what COVID was, and they still let their citizens travel internationally. If that is the case, I hope that this is the beginning of this evil regime's downfall.
Amen to that. Amen. Let me just ask you, Congressman, in your capacity, can you request a secure briefing from DIA? Do our representatives have access to DIA to be able to say, look, guys, can you give us a secure briefing or a non-classified briefing as to what you guys have? Because our constituents are naturally eager to learn if any of this reporting is true.
Well, Chris, certainly as a member of Congress, I could request it. They don't necessarily have to grant it. I think they would in this instance. We hope they would. We are going to, by the way, do that. There is an Intelligence Committee in the Senate. There's an Intelligence Committee in the House. As a freshman member, I'm not serving on the Intel Committee, although one day I'd like to. But here's something scary. You know who is on the Intel Committee? Eric Swalwell, who had the relationship with the Chinese spy. This is absurd. This is what you get under Nancy Pelosi's America, that this person that could have very well committed treason with a Chinese asset is sitting on our Intelligence Committee in the House. This is absurd. It's beyond surreal. It's like Clockwork Orange.
There's a lot, Congressman. There is a lot that's absurd here. If you would just do the show a favor, maybe use your position as a congressman to request a briefing and just come back and let us know what you find out.
Yeah, Chris, I will. And particularly, obviously, if it's unclassified, then I'll share what I'll be able to with you and the American people, because that's who we work for, by the way. We don't work for anybody in Washington, D.C. I work for 760,000 Texans in Northeast Texas. And a lot of these other members of Congress better remember who they're really working for. Or actually, who
Congressman Pat Fallon, always a pleasure to talk with you, sir. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Exactly. Always a pleasure to talk with you, Congressman. We'll talk again soon.